Wonderful. Then we are down to the talk for tonight. Our speaker came all the long way down from Vienna. Please give a big round of applause to Georg Müller.
Thank you very much. Thank you much. So now the hardest part of the day, we need to switch our slides. And it's hopefully perfectly prepared over here. All right, that already worked out, so everything should be fine now. Okay, so perfect. Yeah, thank you for joining. It's great to be here, actually, coming from Vienna and being invited to the very first talk of the revived.NET Stammtisch in Linz. It's a big honor. So my name is Georg Müller. I'm coming all the way from Vienna. But Linz holds a very special place in my heart, actually. So I had the honor to study in Hagenberg. And so actually twice, and so if you might know Hagenberg, it's a very quiet place, and so Linz was always the place where actually something happened. So that was great. Coming back to Linz for a little partying or shopping. So that's the place it has in my heart. And also Austrian people, they're very welcoming, you know. Found many new friends here in the area. And and actually they also had wonderful welcome gifts for me. So like this. Yeah. But so I also about this presentation, so that you know all the contents we have in the presentation, Christian will show it to you. I also have an extra link for that because some of the contents I have here today, there's also a blog series about it. The slides are not very content heavy, but if you want to look up anything, you can also look up in the blog series that is not finished yet, but I might do it someday. So there are a few extra informations in it. Okay, so well, one thing of Hagenberg was very nice because it was a very good opportunity to learn a lot of things, and I really got into technical engineering, and it was my first thing coming from the Allgemeine Hochschule before. And I think learning is a very nice reference here because you should know 3 years ago we started our software agency, and so Cyril, you've seen it before. And so that was the time in my that was really the time when I started to think about, so what am I specialized really in? Yeah, you know, I've been working for over 15 years now in the field, but this is the time founding your company is really when you start to think about what are you specialized in, what are you an expert in, what you really can do good. And so I talked to colleagues and friends, and I thought, helping teams realizing their potential in software development, that is really what I have done all the time during my career as a lead developer and as a coach of lead developers. So these were also the first opportunities that we took on with my new company then. And I started working for a lot of different teams then. You know, we're starting small. It's not the biggest companies that we work for, but it gives the opportunity to work for a lot of different teams. In small companies, in big companies, and in small projects, and in big companies, and it allows us to gain some insight in how different teams work together. Working with these teams, there was one common theme that we've seen everywhere, actually, and it was that they really struggle to decide what they should work next on, right? So deciding what is valuable to work on as a next step and whatnot. So most often what we do is when trying to find out what we do next is to go to some best practices that we have in our field. And I guess these best practices that you find there will always be HR methodologies that you now go to and look there. And you will see in HR methodologies what will be your answer to what you want to build next. Usually it tells you to work on the most valuable thing next, right? User value is what you want to focus on. The answer is that helpful, really? Yeah. So, what would you build next? Let's make an example. What would you build next? Yeah, would it be a new feature that brings your company an additional profit of 1%? Maybe. Or would you build a new CI pipeline that might help you doing your software development work? And I think it depends, right? You cannot make the decision just from that information. You should have a deeper view. It really depends. So the feature, it will turn out more profit for your company. So I guess that's a clear one. But the CI pipeline, it will bring additional confidence into your software development process, and it will enable you to move further ahead, to go longer ahead, do your software project longer, product longer, and be more confident in what you deliver. So you could say, maybe if you start with this feature today, that you're building up technological debt, that might be one thing to view it if you don't build your CI. And investing in your CI, well, it would be an investment. So this is really the difference that you should have here. So I guess sometimes when we talk with our management as to what we should invest into or what should we do next, then instead of talking about technological debt that we might have built up, it is better to talk about technological investment, because I think it's more the language of the people that you talk to when you have some kind of management decisions going on, or if you have to talk about management. So let's look into some specific areas where I saw teams really struggling in and making that decision. Yeah. So as I said, we had two different kind of teams. So we have the larger teams and the smaller teams. So in the larger team, you might have the following situation. You start in your new team, and you want to build your first task, right? So if you're coming in as a new developer, starting with your first task. So you might have seen it. You get your new developer machine, and what do we do as .NET developers when we first want to start working on a project? I guess it would be starting the solution and then press F5 to see if everything starts up. And for how many of you does that work? If you have a freshly baked PC. Great, there are some hands, that's great. Okay, so, but there might also be teams, and I've seen them, that take 5 days until the F5 really does what it works, maybe even 10. Yeah. So it's not always so smooth. And yeah. Same again then happens if you upgrade your dependencies, right? So what would you do to F5? So what might be what is missing? So you might not have installed your database, or you might not have any resources that you need, some kind of access to file shares or something like that. There might be a whole different things that are not pre-installed on your company PC that are missing here. Right. So and then we said it might be a larger project. So you might have 20 developers, you might have 30 developers, you might have 50 developers. I don't know, but when does it really make sense to automate that whole thing? Yeah, I think that should be a valuable question, when to invest into this. Okay, so this is for the larger teams. Yeah. So, but now I've said there might also be small teams. Yeah. And so if you're working in a small team, I don't know, you're working in a small team, you're working efficiently, right? Because, well, you can make a whole new release in 2 weeks, maybe a new software. You deploy it in 1 day directly to prod. Maybe you don't need even 1 day. So that everything is fine. Yeah, so you don't have that problem. Well, but actually, this deployment might have been 2 years ago, and nothing ever changed in these 2 years because your software runs. Yeah? And now you're coming back to that project, and don't believe me, it might happen. So you're coming back and within 2 years, and then take a look at your software again and try to run it. And yeah, when does it run then? Yeah, because then you come back and try to get it to run, and it takes you 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days until you get it to run. And maybe it wasn't even you who developed it in the first place. Yeah. So yeah, these are tough situations to be in, and I think it's something that you can really invest in to get out of these problems. And one of these things that you might be able to use there can be .NET Aspire, which is a new project that has been introduced by Microsoft about a year ago, together in the .NET 8 release. Right, and it because seeing this new project from Microsoft, I tried to take a look at these situations again and try to look at, can we solve these situations with .NET Aspire, because it gives us theoretically a development platform that we know and we love, hopefully, and it gives us a common ground to bring together all those resources that we have. So how did I do this? In reality, now my company is not only consulting for different customers, but we are also building a small little product in our free time, with a few developers. And there we have that problem, because we're developing, once every quarter or something like that, a little feature. So coming back to this software also always brings up the question of, okay, how do we get back in? Now it doesn't work. How do we get it to run? And I wanted to get rid of these questions and make sure that, checking it out, F5, and it runs. So the goal was, from a freshly baked PC, newly installed everything, just download .NET from the package manager, and then get the software to run within a minute. That was the idea, hopefully only F5. And that was the goal that where I set off and started with .NET Aspire. But first, let's take a little look at how Aspire actually is set up, and take a little look at the different components of .NET Aspire and how it works. So if you're starting with a .NET Aspire project, you have these components, and it allows you to do this. And so what is this? You start with a little .NET project that is your app host, and it configures all the resources that you want to start with .NET Aspire. So what does it allow you to do? It does allow you to run your .NET projects, other projects, and containers and everything, and weave it together so that you get a common platform for you on your .NET development device. Yeah? So and everything then starts up as a whole and it runs. So how does it do that? You have your app host. It works a little bit like the generic host in your ASP.NET project if you use that. So, and it has a similar programming model. So it looks very similar. Yeah? And it references the Aspire app host, which is a library that Microsoft builds, which works together with a development control plane. The developer control plane then orchestrates all your resources that you use in your software, in your product. And it also provides some additional functionality for you. For example, it gives you a dashboard where you can see all the resources that are running, all the logs that you have in your software. So from all the containers, everything is coming together on your dashboard. It uses an OpenTelemetry receiver for that. Right. It starts your containers, so everything that you want to bring in externally will be started using your configurations with containers. So no matter if you're using Docker or Podman, you can use that. And it will make sure that everything can talk together using these container networks. And then you can bring in your own code. And your own code, it of course supports .NET. It uses the launch settings.json configuration. So it's just like you're F5ing your own project and it starts up. But you can also bring your .NET. You can also bring in a Node.js applications if you have a front end that you need to be running, or you can also bring in Python projects if you have, I don't know, a data pipeline or something like that that you would like to run together with your .NET projects. Huh? And then you bring it together. And it might not be clear from the architecture here how everything works. So I thought I'll do a little bit of live coding and we'll see how that works. So just let me switch. That was the wrong way around. So where's our code? Here it is. Great. Okay, so let's start to talk about how our project is set up here. So I started a little sample application, and we have a small little .NET application that I reset. That's good. Let's take a look at that. And that was the wrong thing. This one. And take a look. So I built a small little .NET application. It is a kind of a CRM system So that's what you do if you're having a small software agency, right? You're building your own CRM system. Nah, really. So, and this is our application. I actually didn't build it. Didn't build the whole thing, but of course the first thing we needed was deals. So, and it does a thing, right? So you can give it a name. You can write a thing. It's a small little application. It uses Razor pages in the background. Not a lot to see here. But just to make sure that you understand what this application actually does, that is something that we use later. So we have an application, we are adding Razor pages, we have a small EF Core context that uses an SQLite here, and yeah, the rest is, and we have a small API that we can start. So that's the basics of the application. You see it's the smallest possible thing of everything, because this is not the star today. Our star today is .NET Aspire. And what we want to do now is to orchestrate this application so that it starts, and then when it starts using .NET Aspire, we will build it up and make sure that more and more things come together, because, you know, as our project grows, you bring more resources in, you might need additional services, you might even build microservices or something like that, and Aspire helps you here. So, but now we said our core project for Aspire is the app host. And let's first take a look at the app host project, at what makes it special. So an app host project is really a small project. Let's do this. It's really a small project. It has, I guess, 3 specialties here. It references an MS Build SDK, yeah, and this is a difference to the .NET Aspire 8.0 release. So if you already started using Aspire with 8.0 and you're switching to .NET 9, then this is something you have to change. .NET 8 used the workload. It was a real pain to get it running first, especially if you're not using Windows and Visual Studio. And this setup makes it way easier. So that brings in some MS Build targets that are specially used for .NET Aspire. Yeah. Then it brings also in the Aspire host property, which you need to set on this project. It works a little bit like the test project MS Build property you have on test projects, obviously. And you also bring in your reference to the Aspire hosting app host reference, which gives you the distributed application builder that allows you to set up your Aspire resources, and that is your minimal. This is your minimal Aspire project, which now should start up, and which now should only show not my slides. There it is. A dashboard where I can get an overview of all the resources you have configured. We haven't configured any. You get a console overview, logs, traces, and metrics. So you get a little bit of an overview, but I show it with a little more information on it. So the next thing that you would want to do is we now have our application set up. We have our .NET Aspire host running. What we want to do now is to reference our project to make sure that it starts up with the Aspire host and that we can use it within Aspire. So it doesn't do a whole lot. So what you can do is you're adding the builder and adding the .NET add dot. That works great. And you can add the project, which has no .NET in it. And there are two ways to actually do this. So if you take a look, you probably can see that. You can provide it with a name that you will have actually to do, because in Aspire, resources need names that uniquely identify your resources. Okay? So we call this our CRM, and then you would have to give it the path to the project. There's the long way to actually search the path of the project, or the good way to add a dependency to your web project that you want to start. Now, by adding that reference, you get a resource added, and now I should have the Aspire sample web as a type in here. Great. And so this class now has all the information that you need to actually start the .NET project. How does it look like? Let's take a look into the generated source code. Well, you see, it's pretty simple. It is a generated class. The name actually refers to the actual name of the project. And it provides iProject metadata. And there's actually only the project path in there, which holds your absolute path to the project that you're referencing. And that is all that you need. So if we now start the app host, then you see that we added our project. It is called CRM, and it refers to the Aspire sample web project. And it also has a little link where you can go into and you find your application, which I found hugely helpful, because in many applications that's the first, hurdle. But that's not the only thing that you can do here. What you also see are details about this configuration. So is this big enough for everybody? Yeah. So you see some metadata about the resource that are running. Yeah, you have, for example, process ID. You see all the endpoints that are published for this application. But you also see your environment variable, which I think is it's a huge deal for making sure that when you go to production to understand how your application gets configured using environment variable. I think it makes it so much easier to understand that. And you see also health checks that are configured. More there a little bit later. And what you also get are now console logs for all the resources that you have. Yeah? So where we don't see anything right now is here in our open telemetry. But that's the next thing that we want to do. Aspire also comes with another project template. And I already created it here. It brings these service defaults with it. And service defaults brings some defaults that you could argue makes sense in pretty much any ESP.NET application that runs in a cloud or cloud-like environment, cloud-native environment. So it configures things like open telemetry so that OpenTelemetry is exported from all the services within your application. You also get HTTP resilience handlers so that you have retries configured and all these things. And it also provides you with a service discovery mechanism that you can use when having a microservice-like environment. If you want to talk between two different microservices, you can use that. I personally think it's not actually that helpful because it doesn't really use any standard mechanisms. It uses a way to so it uses a protocol handler, its own protocol handler, making it a bit different to rely on it, I think, because you're not having HTTPS, but your resource name plus HTTPS in it. And it's a little bit different from everything else you would have than everywhere else in your project. But I will not show this kind of service discovery here. But if you're interested in it, it's one part of the blog series that's already ready in my blog. Yeah. Okay. So how do we make sure that our service defaults are applied? I deleted it before. Now I can add it back. You add these service defaults, and then we restart the thing. And the next thing we should see is that we have our structured logging in here. We have our first traces coming into the dashboard and giving you an overview to what is happening, connecting the different services together and what HTTP requests are happening. And you have your metrics where you can take a look at, I don't know, whatever interests you, what .NET standard metrics will give you. So I think that's very interesting to have that, because these are also informations that you would have available in your cloud environment if you're using some open telemetry compatible service to debug your production, right? So you would have your traces, your metrics, and your structured logs. So I think using this to debug on your own machine also provides valuable insights into what information you will get on your production system, and if it already helps you. So best thing would be, if you have a problem on your development machine, to be able to debug it using this information, because then when it happens in production, you know that you're ready. I think it's a good practice. Yeah, so now we have our smallest of applications with our smallest of databases, but and we have some additional information for debugging, but that might not yet be very interesting. So what we want to do next is, if you go to production with our perfectly capable CRM system now, then you might have some talk with your, I don't know, IT department or someone who wants to run this application, if there is someone. And they might tell you, well, a little SQLite database is so nice, but we want to have this on our application, on our database system here, which might be, you know, an Oracle database in the worst case for me. An SQL server or a Postgres server, yeah? So that's what we're gonna add next. And I think it's very valuable that you can do that locally, because you want to run the same thing on your development machine than you do in production, right? So that makes it easier. So we add a little database now. What do we need to do there? If we take a look in here, we will see that we have no Postgre database. And we'll get from the Aspire team some pre-configured resources that we can use to set up additional things in our local environment. And there is a PostgreSQL integration that we can use here, which we will add to the correct project right here. So now having added that, I just can call add Postgre. Once again, I need to provide a unique name, so I call that DB. And I can provide additional ports here, but I don't want to. So this is what we want to do. So, well, let's start this, I guess. If we do this, we're launching Aspire, we're taking a look into our dashboard, and we see a container is starting up that has our Postgre database. And you've seen it started in an unhealthy state. It checked the health of the database, and when the database got healthy, the state updated. And it also provides the endpoint in this case, because I haven't configured anything. It uses a random port, and that random port is actually very interesting because if you use Docker without Aspire, you can really have a similar experience, right? So you can add your Postgre database to a compose file. You can make a binding for a port. I don't know, but I think it can even be random. And then you start your Docker Compose. And when that spins up and is ready, you launch your .NET project. But it wouldn't know which random port was assigned, so you give it a fixed port, and the fixed port also means you need to have started it before. You can't just F5 it. So I think that's the benefit here. Okay, so but now we only have our database instance, so the name might not be perfect there. Going back to our thing, so this is our database instance. We stop that again. Database instance. What we also want to have is a database for our CRM. And the instance allows us to add our database. Once again, a database is a resource in Aspire, so we need to provide a name. So we provide our name CRMDB. And we need to provide a name, what it is called on the database instance. So it will be called CRM in our instance. So the first name is the name of the resource in Aspire. The second name is the name of the database on this database instance. Okay, so now our database will be created. There is just one thing. How does our application actually know how to connect to that database, right? So we have now a database instance, and it got a user actually when setting up that container. And what is now the password of that user? Well, actually, that's random too, and that's great. because we don't need to have any standard password. So what we now want to do is making sure that our project knows how to connect to that database. And we do this using the with endpoint configuration on our project that allows us to set up a reference between the database and the project. Okay? No?
With reference.
With reference, you're right. Thank you. With reference, of course. Okay, with reference. So the reference, what the reference does is, let's take a look at it on the dashboard. I think it makes the most sense. The reference makes sure that you will get a connection string to this database in your configuration. So we go in here. We have our connection strings. We call it's your MDB. And we can take a look at what is in there and open the text visualizer. And you see there's everything in it so that our .NET application can now use that database. Yeah, so you have the host, the port that was configured. You see starting it new has configured another port, so fewer problems with any port conflicts. You get your username and your random password. So great, that probably also makes an InfoSec happy if you don't have anything configured with the key password. I'm not sure, but my InfoSec might be complaining about that. Okay, so now we need to make sure that our application actually uses this, because it still uses the SQLite. So let's change this. And let's comment this. And I provided this. So that it uses the database. But actually, I used a different name right now, so we should call that your MDB, because this is the name of our connection string that it should use. Yeah. So this is the first thing where it happens that not everything on Aspire is perfect right now, because the retry should be set up perfectly here, but it doesn't always work, so I needed to add it so that it works here. So there are still caveats. So running that again. Make sure everything is running. Going back into our application. And we see no deals in here because it's a fresh container. And it's a container that doesn't have a data volume configured. Yeah, right? So before that, we used an SQLite database. It stored it locally. Now we're using a container, and it doesn't have a data volume configured, so this is empty. So we can still add a test and save that. And going back into our application here, we see what happened. We see that the post request already happened. We have the get request here. It loaded our pages. And you can make sure that this is the thing that you want to do. Not only that, but what you also see here is your SQL connection, because it's OpenTelemetry integrated. OpenTelemetry not only sends the request that you got to the dashboard, but also the SQL connection, and you can see your query that has happened in here, which I find very nice. It's super helpful. Everybody should have OpenTelemetry. Okay, so this was a ready-made application from Microsoft that was set up here. That's not the only thing that you can add. Let's say the next thing, our CRM system should contact us if something important happens. I don't know if a large deal or something like that comes in. So what we want to do is that we have an SMTP server ready that can spit out our emails. And what we don't want to do is have a test system that sends emails via a live SMTP server, because customers can be really angry about that. So what do we want to do on our Aspire project here? So we wanted to add maybe a fake SMTP server, right? So I call that SMTP. And so there are multiple options. I like to use Mailhawk here. So Mailhawk is available on Docker.io as container. And the nice thing is it's written in Go, so we have another language in here that we can use. And so let's think about if I can get together all the endpoints by heart. As I said, MailPoint is a fake SMTP server, so it won't actually send any emails, but it will just store the emails and give you an web application, so you can look at the emails that have been sent. And there are actually 2 ports you want to bind here, and it's port, I think it's 1025. And not in this, the other way around. And it has an HTTP endpoint on 8025. So the thing is, there are also names on endpoints, and you need them for reference. And that should work. And we want to reference it in our container. So and we'll add it to our project down here. So there's one important thing to know here, and that's it is clear from a database point of view to what you want to connect to, right? So you want to connect to the database. Up here I have 2 different endpoints, so that doesn't make it clear. And to which thing you want to connect, because your container would want to connect to your SMTP endpoint. You don't need to connect to that, but you want to connect to the HTTP endpoint. And to make sure that the .NET project has reference to the right SMTP endpoint, you can use the getEndpoint method here and say the name of the SMTP endpoint. So we'll run it. And let's see if that works fine. everything is coming up, right? So that's the way how you would add any external container that you want to add, any microservices you might build, a Docker containers or something like that, and how you can wire it up to make sure that things can talk to each other. Okay, but there's one more important thing that I want to talk about, because I think that's actually the killer feature for me for the whole thing. And this is integration tests, because it's all nice that I have now my dashboard where I can dive into my application and let it run. But actually, these resources that I have configured here, these are all resources that I also want to be available in my integration tests, right? So if I set up my integration tests and I start up my web application factory, I want that everything that is configured here is also available in my tests. And there are two ways to do that in Aspire. So the way that Microsoft thought of and the way that works for me. And so I'll show you the difference. Let's take a look at our integration tests, and let's make it a little bit bigger to have that. So I commented out the way that Microsoft thought of. The way that you work with integration tests in .NET Aspire is to reference your application host, and then add an Aspire.testing reference to your project, and that will give you the distributed application testing builder that you can that you provide your reference to the project that you want to start, and you can use it. So it starts your it loads your app host actually, and you can use and it gives you the configuration of the app host. So you're not getting only the running app host, but you can also go into the web host and change the configuration, and it's something that totally makes sense. I'll give you the example later. And then you would build the app host and start it, and then you can get your HTTP client to call an API or something like that. And it sounds very good at the first hand, but there's a problem in it. Aspire uses this application model that you have seen, and it launches the application that you're actually referencing here in a separate process. So you don't get the chance to reconfigure the project that you're testing, right? So what I do in my integration tests is I launch the web application factory, and then I use the services to reconfigure some services. If I have some external dependency, I would mock it out. Yeah, an external dependency that I can't have here on my PC. It might be some cloud reference or something like that. I need to run the whole application. Then I want to mock it. And to mock it, I need to have a reference to the service configuration. And having that in a separate process doesn't allow me to manipulate the service configuration. So that's one thing that I wanted to do. So I talked a little bit with the ASP.NET team, and we came up with a hack, I guess. But it works really good for me in a project, and we executed several thousand tests at the moment with that, and it works really well. And now Microsoft is already working on that, fleshing out how that would be a whole solution. But I thought I also show you my hack, and it's not only my hack, I have to say, because much of the code has also been provided by Martin Fowler from the .NET team. So credits go mostly to him. So what do we want to do here? First, we want to manipulate our app host a little bit here. and go into our resources and make sure that the application is actually not started by Aspire, right? So we don't want to have the process spun up by Aspire, because we want to build our own web application factory so that we can configure that later. So that's what I'm excluding here by getting into the resources, searching the unique name of the application, and then removing it from our resources. So you see, that's also something you can do, so you can start to work a little bit with these applications. What I also do, I haven't shown it right now, you can also add, you've seen that for the Postgres database, we didn't add a data volume, so it didn't actually persist. But you can configure that over here, that it also gets a data volume by adding something, it's the wrong resource, with data volume, yeah? So now it has a data volume, anything gets persisted locally to your PC, which is what I would want when I press F5 for the application, because I have some testing that I do and I want that to be persisted. But I don't want to do, or I don't need that when I'm launching integration tests, to always start with a clean state for my integration tests. Okay, so I also removed that from my resources. So I use the same configuration, kinda, but a little bit different. And then what I do is, especially here, is I want to make sure that my database is ready to be called when I start the integration test, because the integration tests, when starting the integration tests, the database will take a little bit longer to start up than my test framework. So I added a little bit of code that does a health check, and when it can connect to it and do a little bit of select one, then my database is ready and the tests can move on. So then I start my app host. Okay, now I have everything started up that is configured in my app host configuration, but not my own code that I want to test. So what I have excluded here is the resource and the code that I want to test. So the system under test is the one that's excluded. So, but you have seen on the dashboard that Aspire is used to configure my application, right? It provides the environment variables to configure my own .NET application. So I want to get those environment variables, and now we're coming to the code that's been kindly provided by David Fowler. I think I've cited Martin before, to provide that test. So to provide that information, and these are the way you get all the environment variables and do a little reformatting. I will provide, so the code is provided. I won't show you in detail. I haven't wrote it, and it's also a kind of a hack. Yeah. So, but it works, and it's reliable. So, and I think he created it in about an hour or something like that. It was a great help. So, and then I'll get it back. I get it back as a dictionary, and I can use that in a web application factory. I created here this sample web application factory, where I get the dictionary string and string that holds all my environment variables, and I provide it to the application configuration. And yeah, then the environment is loaded. So, in theory, if that works, the integration test should now work, but I can tell you they won't. And the reason why they won't, so I'm sure it takes some time, because it needs to wait for everything to be spun up. But the nice thing here is that it only loads this one time if you set it up properly when you start your integration tests. Yeah. Okay, so now why doesn't that work right now? And the reason is that the web application factory also is it has its problems. Does anybody think that it is has somebody here already debugged the web application factory once? I think it's really some piece of magic, and it works a little bit different than if you just start your application. So you need to be aware of that. And actually is that it runs your code more than once. And that's important to know because it runs this code. So it runs all your code in your program TS first, and only then you get the chance to actually manipulate it. So the CRMDB here, it doesn't yet exist when you run this code because the connection string does not exist because you haven't already provided in your tests this configuration. So this configuration that you provide in your tests only happens to exist later when the code here is executed the second time, and you get a whole new service configuration for that. And you need a little bit of a hack there to get that to run. So we're also commenting this, and we're using this. No, we're using this. So what is the difference? The difference here is it doesn't use the Aspire setup logic here to get the connection string, but it uses the default EF core logic that also gives you a callback with the service provider in there, right? So, and only when the service provider, and only in that situation, the life cycle of the web application factory where you already have the service provider, you can get the connection string out of your configuration, but because only then it has already been configured in your web application factory. So I think this is very unsatisfactory, but that's the way it is today. So you need that. Now you can get the connection string from your Aspire configuration that you provided in the test here. And now if we start that, then it should work. And if it doesn't, I might have messed up somewhere a resource name.
Pretty sure it was still sample.db.
Yeah, it works. The reason the reason that this works is you're right, but these tests are built against my sample code I built earlier, so this is a kind of a cooking show. This was provided earlier. Yeah. You've seen the problems and what has to fit together, and I wanted to make sure that at least I can show you a working thing here. Right. So, but I hope it shows that and that can provide a lot of value. Yeah. So if you add an additional resource to your application, everybody just gets it. And if they launch the integration tests, and if you launch if they're launching your dashboard, everybody just has the resources that they need, and there might not be a confusion if you update your databases or if you add a new resource to all your application, and that gets worse when you're having a microservice environment or something like that. Okay, so that would be the demo. Are there any questions right now? Great, I spread too much confusion. Okay. So, let's turn back to the slides. So how do I do that? Somewhere down there. These are my slides. Okay, great. So, this was the demo. So, what was my conclusion here? And let me pull up that I can see it over here too. Perfect. So the first thing, did I manage to get down to 1 minute, right? I started with the premise I wanted to get down to 1 minute. In my project, and no, not really. And the reason was external resources, but I'm still working on it. And Aspire is not the problem here, I have to say. I worked around most of the problems. But just giving you my insights that I gained here. So it was a very quick setup for me. Yeah, I really enjoyed starting it. You've seen the programming model, if you're working with ASP.NET, is very similar. It's great to have the same setup to run the application and to run integration tests. Yeah, so that was always something that was different for me in earlier projects when I worked with things like Docker Compose or something like that, and having just one source of truth there, not forgetting the other part, very important. It works great locally, but also in your CI. So it runs in GitHub Actions. It runs on Azure DevOps. That's out of the CI servers where I tested it. No, Circle CI is also on it. So if you have anything else, I can give you guarantees. But I think it should be relatively free from any issues. You just need to make sure that you can start containers somewhere. Yeah, either Docker or Podman is supported. And I think it provides a much clearer process of how you as a developer can start your application, and also it gives you a documentation that you would never have written anyway, right? So it has a clear process. But as I've said, there are some caveats and there are cons. Actually, .NET Aspire is somehow open source, and all the .NET code is open source, but there is this little thing, the developer, the DCP, I forgot what it's called in the long form, and the DCP part of the thing is not open source. Nobody knows why. Maybe they have just forgotten it. There is an issue in the Aspire repository that they should also open source it, but it has not happened yet. Yeah. Another con you've seen, I always restarted the applications, and that's because .NET Watch is not yet supported. It might happen in the future. They're still fixing some bugs there and telling us it's on the roadmap. I hope they can get it to run, because it makes it a little bit harder to use, especially working if you have a high amount of feedback that you're working into your project, right? Always restarting the application makes it difficult. The integration test scenario is not fully fledged out. And what I've also seen is, and what I'm missing is the Renovate support in there. We are using Renovate to updating our containers normally in the build. And there's not a bot that knows how Aspire works today. let's see if there ever will be, but I think that's an interesting thing to have a pinned version of your .NET containers in there and not using a fixed version there. So I said I haven't managed to get down to 1 minute. What was the biggest issue? The biggest issue was contacting our cloud environments, because our cloud environments want to have passwords or want to have keys or something like that, and I didn't want to have my keys for the cloud environments in the Aspire configuration. That's something you can solve if you have something that manages your keys or something like that, because you can provide parameters to the Aspire service that you can also integrate, like the configuration system in ASP.NET. You can also integrate key providers or something like that into .NET Aspire, but I haven't done it yet. Right, so how has it improved the dev workflows that I've been working on? Or which workflows has it improved? Obviously my integration test, because I have this one source of truth that works. When reproducing bugs, it makes it simpler because it's closer to our production environment. Everything is there. Nothing has to be downloaded or something like that. You can get the whole thing and just start debugging your problem. Onboarding of new developers, of new colleagues has gotten very much easier, because you download it, and if you have all the things you need on your PC and your PC is allowed to run anything, you should be able to run Aspire. Yeah. And yeah, no, that might still be an issue, but fortunately it was not an issue for me on my PC. And yeah, updating dependencies is also super easy. So final question, was it worth investing in .NET Aspire? You decide. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions.
Have you used the test containers package before, and how would you compare those two? And what's your experience running this across different platforms?
Please repeat the question. So
yeah. So the question was if I have used the test containers environment and how it did compare. And so let me just answer that. I used test container before in a project where I now replaced test containers by Aspire. We had several difficulties with test containers.net that might not be really connected to test containers.net, but the problem there was that this wasn't, so it was this two configurations problem. Right, so we had a Docker Compose and we had the test containers.net, and most probably when something changed, one thing wasn't updated, and you probably found it much too late what the actual problem was, especially in tests that haven't been executed 100% resiliently here. Okay, so what was the second part of the question?
What's your experience running this on different platforms?
Okay, my experience for different platforms, yeah. I'm using .NET Aspire here on Linux. So that's not a great problem, and I'm using it on a project on a Windows machine. And there we also use our CI there runs on Linux. So it works in an environment that is multi-platform. That works. Might of course be some differences in behavior that just exist in multi-platform environments. So it doesn't relieve you of that. It just makes it easier to configure over different platforms. I there any additional questions?
I hope I did not misunderstand it, but basically the configuration for all the other services was wired up by Aspire with the references in the code, correct?
Right.
But when we deploy to production, we might have a database already running in the cloud, so I don't want to spin up a container with a new instance. So how would I override or overrule the config that Aspire provides with the actual production configuration?
Mm-hmm. So the question was, how does that behave if you go to production? And I guess one question would also be, do you still use Aspire when going into production? And there are different ways of doing this. So what you can do is, so Aspire in itself is an orchestrator for all your resources. So you might have an orchestrator if you're working in the cloud. You will already have an orchestrator because it is either your cloud management system or you might have Kubernetes or something like that running in your cloud. So you probably don't want to use Aspire there. It also doesn't allow you to set up a cluster or something like that. So Aspire is really, at the moment, used for one machine. Yeah? So there's no clustering or something like that. But what you can actually do is you can reuse your configuration to deploy it to the cloud. Yeah, that's something that Aspire allows you. I haven't shown it here because I don't use it in that way. But there is, on the CLI, there is an export command that allows you to export a JSON that is that holds all the configuration variables that you need to set up the same resources in your cloud environment. And then there are additional integrations with Azure Application Service, I think, that allows you to deploy that to Azure Application Service or deploy it to Kubernetes. There's an open source project, I think, Aspire to deploy to Kubernetes. But the problem is the same. So it allows you to configure through this export. You can there override your production environment variables, and you can do that. You can do it theoretically, but you might also already have your existing system. I don't know. Yeah, we are deploying our resources using Terraform. We are quite happy with that. I don't see the need in having Aspire there. For us, it was just using just using it on our development machines. So there might be ways to do it. I haven't used them yet. This is the TLDR here.
Follow-up question. It was called distributed builder.
Yeah.
Is it possible to run multiple instances of your CRM project, for example?
Yeah. So when it's on one machine, so they started building it, having multiple instances of your application on one machine. So you can test out some scenarios for distributed there. But it's definitely not a way to go if you want to split it up on multiple machines. Are there any additional questions? Okay.
All right.
So we'll try to
There
make
are
a
no more
last switch.
questions. Then please give a big round of applause to the speaker from tonight, Georg Müller. All right. And from our side, that's basically it. That was the official part with our talk. Please remember to stay connected to us. We have the QR code there. But please don't just leave yet. Please stay around. We got beer, we got pizza, I think. Big thanks to host SmartPoint. We're going to stay around for a little bit of networking chat. Thanks to each and everyone for coming to us here tonight. As mentioned, next date is not fixed yet. It might be on the 27th of March. Find it out online. Till the next time. See you, bye-bye. Wir haben noch was zu tun.